Madam Deputy Speaker. I draw the House's attention to my interests set out in the Register and thank the Backbench Committee and indeed the International Development Committee, so ably led by the Honourable Lady for Rotherham. It's also a pleasure to follow the Honourable Lady who has just spoken and who shadowed me for a period of time when I had responsibility for some of these matters. I also want to underline what has been said already about our respect and gratitude to humanitarian workers around the world, British and others, who put themselves in harm's way for their fellow members of humanity, and of course also to our brilliant diplomats who are the subject of these estimates debates. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister, when responding to me last week, mentioned the possibility of a vote on these estimates. Languidly, this ball was tossed to him by the Leader of the House. But I think it's worth just making clear, not least for those outside this place, that there was never any question of having a vote on the estimates, and the Leader of the House was merely teasing the House by suggesting this, since he knows perfectly well that it is neither sensible nor serious to vote in this way. I believe he sleeps with Erskine and May on his nightstand, and he knows this very well. The estimates have never been rejected by this place. They can either be reduced or rejected. They cannot be increased. And of course, many of us want to see them increased so that we honour our commitment to point 7. So if we had accepted his invitation on the estimates, the Foreign Office, and we have rejected them, the Foreign Office would have needed to send out redundancy notices on Monday in order to meet its legal obligations. And like Liverpool in the days of Derek Hatton and the loony left. And they think that we, who stand up for the point 7, are the irresponsible members of this House. So let us be absolutely clear on the estimates. To oppose them would have given my right honourable friend the Chief Whip all his Christmases in one go. No responsible opposition would support such a thing. What we seek from this government that is rebelling against its own promises and manifesto is a meaningful vote, not a show of force, something that the government can ignore. And we do this in accordance with Mr. Speaker's specific instructions to the government at 3:30 on June the 14th, just a couple of weeks ago. Now, why do we care so much about this, Madam Deputy Speaker? Just 3 points I'd like to make, because the House has heard me probably enough on much of this. But this is hurting our reputation, and it is threatening our foreign policy ambitions. My right honourable friend, who spoke so eloquently from Maidenhead, made it her first commitment in the 2017 election, because she understood the importance of standing by the point 7 in reinforcing our values and our promises. But much worse, these unprecedented cuts in the heart of a pandemic are damaging hundreds of thousands of people's lives and leading to many avoidable deaths. The 3 examples I just wanted to mention very quickly is our first, education, which the Prime Minister has spoken about so eloquently for girls, and which the British policy has been driven passionately and effectively by my right honourable friend for West Warwickshire. And yet we are cutting this investment by 40%. 700,000 fewer girls will now get into education, but also we are cutting by 60% UNICEF, an agency which is the very engine of getting girls into school, and which the British government in 2010 doubled UNICEF's grants. And remember this, Madam Deputy Speaker, a third of all girls in secondary schools in Africa drop out because they become pregnant, and yet we are cutting by 85% the work that the United Nations Family Planning Agency does across the world. 85% cut. It is not, as my right honourable friend for Maidenhead indicated, joined-up government. I give way, of course.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Would he agree that it's often women and girls across the world who face the brunt of climate change in their own communities, and the cutting back of aid within those countries and communities is really having a devastating effect, not only over there, but the interconnected nature of climate means it's impacting us here. And in the year of COP, 5 months away from it, surely we should expect better from this government.
It's an extremely good point. You cannot understand international development unless you see it through the eyes of girls and women. Now, the second point, which has already been mentioned, is the 90% cut in neglected tropical diseases. This is a huge British taxpayer investment. It is also one of the best investments you can make in global health. And the Prime Minister, in a superb video earlier this year, promised strongly to support this work. Yet it's now been cut by 90%. That means that 74 million skilled children won't receive drugs to prevent parasitic worms. It means that huge numbers will be maimed, blinded, debilitated, disabled and killed. And the UK was a world leader in this extraordinarily important area, stimulating public and private sector partnerships. And as a result of this cut, hundreds of millions of drugs, vaccines and tablets will be wasted and probably burnt. And the second point that I wanted to make, or third point rather, on this, is been very well made by both my honourable friends from Somerset and Frome and Billericay, and it is about the work of the British Council, voluntary service overseas, and the International Citizens Service, which I had the privilege of setting up some 10 years ago. There's no clarity about the future funding of the International Citizens Service, which has sent thousands and thousands of youngsters off overseas, many of them not from well-off families, but from families which were on free school meals. And they have been brilliant ambassadors for our country, as well as doing such a good job in terms of international development. And the British Council too, which I know my honourable friend from Billericay is going to talk about, is now far more self-sufficient in terms of raising its own money and doing a better deal for the taxpayer than it ever was before. And to let it down in this way is really quite wrong. And is it any wonder, Madam Deputy Speaker, that my right honourable friend from Maidenhead rather movingly made the point 7 her first pledge in the 2017 general election? Now, I also want to draw the House's attention to the words of the Deputy Foreign Secretary, the Minister for Braintree, who as little time ago as the 9th of July last year said this from the dispatch box: "The government remains completely committed to the 0.7 of GNI to ODA. That has been called into question a number of times, so I will repeat myself. Despite the fact that my time is short, the government are completely committed to the 0.7 target. That commitment is embedded in law, but we do not spend 0.7 because it is embedded in law. We spend 0.7 because it is the right thing to do." And so I end, Madam Deputy Speaker, on just 2 points. When is the government going to abide by Mr Speaker's instruction to the House at 3:30 on the 14th of June to bring forward a meaningful vote? And then secondly, post-Brexit, with the emphasis on returning powers to this Parliament, we stand here today on an issue where we all promised, all 650 of us, to stand by the 0.7, where the government gave undertakings on the floor of the United Nations General Assembly, an issue which is enshrined in law, with the most senior lawyers in the country warning that the government have changed the 0.7 and not missed that target, and which the government is avoiding this vote because they know they will lose a vote on the floor of this House. And if that is the case, Madam Deputy Speaker, what is the point of the good people of the royal town of Sutton Coldfield sending me down here, when what has become of the pride we all feel in being members of this place, if we cannot secure a vote on an issue of life and death? Do we not need to look afresh at the balance of power between the executive and government, the legislature, this House of Commons, to see that we do have powers in this situation to have a vote on something that is so important and to which so many of us have been for years so committed? Yeah.